And we're back with more from our panel. Jerry, what are the stakes here for the president? 12 cities, 5 days, or 12 cities that he's going, 12 days, 5 cities, sorry. What are the stakes here for his trip?
Well, you know, the White House is saying this is the longest Asia trip by a president in 25 years. And so it tells you that Asia is central to the foreign policy calculations of the president for two reasons. One is the obvious confrontation with North Korea, and the other is the attempt to have a tougher trade relationship with China. And the key on this trip is whether those two things can fit together. Can you cooperate with China on North Korea while still having a pretty tough trade conversation with China on its own terms? And that's, I think, the challenge for the president. You know, I do think Asia is going to loom large throughout the Trump term.
Ramesh, do you think it's the president, say, focused overseas, he's got important business over there, leave the tax conversation to his colleagues, or do you expect, does this hurt the Republican tax cut push that the president, who is a marketer, a salesman, knows how to brand things, is overseas?
When you talk to Capitol Hill Republicans, they are not concerned that President Trump is going to be out of the country while they're trying to roll out these tax packages. If anything, they are pleased. They would prefer to be able to make this case without the potential of distractions from the president, without the potential of his maybe undermining some elements of their plan.
Right. Susan, you checked back in with the Trump voters 1 year after his victory. What did you find?
Well, we found with our Trump voter panel, that's kind of a focus group we've had for a year, that they like his policies. They're not really concerned, most of them, about the Russia investigation, but they're unhappy that things haven't gotten done, and they identify the problem as his own behavior. 2/3 of the people in this focus group identified Trump's behavior, and especially his tendency to tweet, as a reason he's not getting things done. A truck driver in Boise said to us, you know, he's not drowning, but he's also not on land yet.
Jamelle, speaking of things that, it's interesting to hear people are not concerned about Russia. This was the week that we saw real moves, right. Not speculation, but actual moves by the special counsel. What did you make of that decision by Mueller?
I thought it was sort of a remarkable bit of power politics playing, right? That not just the charges against Manafort, which I think a lot of people sort of saw something like that coming, but specifically the charges against Papadopoulos, which were a surprise and did seem to signal some sort of deeper ties between the Russian government and members of the Trump campaign that did seem to throw the White House off balance. And that does matter. I've spoken to some Trump voters over the course of the year, and to a person, they're like, this Russia thing is all nonsense. But it is the case that it does disrupt the president's administration. It does disrupt his attempt to push policies forward. And in the case of trying to push something like a tax reform bill, it matters that the president's attention is elsewhere. It matters that the White House is dealing with what may become a legal crisis for key members as they're trying also to pursue an agenda. One
of the things, the ways the president's reacted, Ramesh, is that he's said to his Department of Justice, you should be investigating Hillary Clinton. He really jumped on this Donna Brazile news about her claim that Hillary Clinton basically had the Democratic National Committee on her side. That's the, you know, obviously the criticism is the president's not supposed to be jawboning his attorney general in this way. Do you think there's any peril in that for him, or is this sort of behavior that for President Trump, because for some people that's a huge deal, putting that pressure on the Department of Justice?
It's the sort of thing that if it were coming out of a clear blue sky would be completely shocking and would lead to a real uproar in D.C. But because it's President Trump and because there's so much background noise from him where he's done so many similar things and violated so many previous norms, it doesn't register in quite the same way. I think all of this stuff, the attack on the Justice Department for not going after Clinton, the occasional attacks from Trump's allies on Mueller, they're basically keeping his base in line. They're keeping his base with something to say that is positive for them or at least negative about the Democrats. I don't think it's working on independent voters. I don't think it's working on Democratic voters. Yeah,
one of the things I think really should be emphasized is just how far Trump's approval has fallen from even a low point. Multiple job approval polls came out this past week, and they all showed Trump at the high 38 and at the low 34. That while his base may not be shaking from him, increasingly, most Americans are looking at this presidency as something close to a failed one.
Although, you know what? Problems with Republicans problems for Democrats, too. I mean, here is this opportunity with a president with record low approval ratings a year after his election, and Democrats are now in the process of just fracturing in ways that endanger a big election coming up on Tuesday, the Virginia governor's race. This is a race Democrats ought to win. It's a state Hillary Clinton carried last year. It's a state with 2 Democratic senators, and yet the election of the Democrat is not guaranteed. That is going to be a very close race.
You know, it seems to me the Democrats have to get in a position in which they can stop debating Hillary Clinton. I mean, that's got to make Donald Trump very happy, right? Every day the Democrats are arguing about the Clinton campaign is a good day for Donald Trump because that's what he wants people focused on. And Democrats somehow have to get beyond 2016 and into 2018 and 2020. Although, as you note, that's hard because there's a split in the party. There's a progressive wing pushing the party to the left. There's a centrist part of the party that wants to hang in there with Clinton-like policies. And that's not an easy thing to finesse. And you're seeing in California in the race, the re-election race for Senator Dianne Feinstein, just how tough that might turn out to be.
A quick note on the Virginia race, though. I think it matters for Republicans, too, because the Republican nominee, Ed Gillespie, is running an interesting campaign of starting out with a sort of business-focused economic message, but in the closing stretch, focusing on the Confederate statue controversy. A mailer went out showing an NFL player kneeling, sort of focusing on these like culture war, sort of white identity politics issues, immigration. And if Gillespie wins, that kind of shows a potential path for Republican candidates next year.
Well, that's right, Ramesh. Do you find, is that right? A Democratic strategist said to me that Ed Gillespie is not running on Trump, not running with Trump, but running on Trumpism. In other words, using the tactics and strategies. And is that replicable? At least Gillespie's doing pretty well by the polls. Do you think that's something that Republicans will go to school on? Do you see this race as a template?
Well, I think the Trumpiness of the Gillespie campaign has been overstated. I mean, if you think about the George H.W. Bush campaign in 1988, with its emphasis on law and order, with the Willie Horton ad and so forth, and which, of course, people at that time criticized as having a racial subtext or racial overtones. We're getting the same thing here, but it's basically bedrock Republicanism, this support for law and order. The fact is, Virginian voters are concerned about MS-13. Sanctuary cities that Gillespie's against, Northam, the Democratic candidate, has now flip-flopped, and he's against them, too. So I think that Gillespie is running the kind of campaign nearly any Republican would.
I think that this illustrates how Trump has taken over the Republican Party, even if he has a small base. And for evidence of that, just look, the only Republicans who criticize him are Republicans who are either out of politics or getting out of politics.
Jamelle, go ahead.
And I think there's a critical context in Virginia that has to be said, which is that on August 12th of this year, white nationalists killed someone in Charlottesville, Virginia, and running the kind of campaign Gillespie's running in that context, I think reads very differently than, say, Bush 88.
Jerry, let me ask you about Donna Brazil's book, former DNC chair. What do you make of it and her charges about Hillary Clinton?
Well, this goes back to the point I made before about the Democrats need to get beyond Hillary Clinton, but that book is going to pull them all back in, at least for the foreseeable future, into a debate about that. The book is fairly remarkable by all accounts because it is a complete rehashing of that civil war within the Democratic Party. And what I found a fairly amazing acknowledgement that there was consideration at the party headquarters of finding a way in September of 2016 to undo the nomination process. I've never heard of anything quite like that. Now, you know, the Clinton people are reacting as you would expect them to react, with indignation and also a sense of, you know, this is just old scores being settled. But it keeps the conversation alive and backward-looking for Democrats.
One thing I'm interested in, Ramesh, is and we'll see if this is true in Virginia, is there's a theory that in off-year elections, of course, Democrats don't turn out the way Republicans do, but Donald Trump would get them to turn out. Is that also what's at stake here in Virginia, which is that some sense of the power of Donald Trump as a motivating factor for Democratic voters in an off-year election?
I think that is one of the things that we're going to find out. I think for much of the year, Democrats and some Republicans have been assuming that Trump would be a powerful motivator for Democratic voters. But I think if you look at the way that the Democrats are actually campaigning, they haven't been quite sure how to play this issue. In the primaries, Ralph Northam ran a very tough anti-Trump ad, but subsequently he said he'd be willing to work with Trump. This may say something about Northam's strengths or weaknesses as a candidate, but I think it also shows that there's a question mark for a lot of Democratic strategists. How do you play this? Because even voters who are against Trump doesn't necessarily mean their number one priority in a governor is his being against Trump.
You know, this race is a test between which party is more broken. A Republican Party led by Donald Donald Trump in a blue trending kind of state, a purple state trending blue, or a Democratic Party where, by the way, Bernie Sanders has refused to endorse the Democratic gubernatorial candidate, which is extraordinary.
All right, we're going to have to end it there. Thanks to all of you, and we'll be right back.